Good morning, friends. I'm putting this video together because I was thinking about my experience at Prairie Bible Institute. And I called this message Prairie Bible Institute, a unique Christian experience. Now, most of you, if you have attended Prairie Bible Institute, you know what I'm talking about. But for those of us who see it just as another Bible school that trained pastors and missionaries, it is much more. And so from the view of outsiders, it's just another school like any other school, except they specialize in Bible. But Prairie is not a school like any other school, and I've attended a few other ones, and I haven't seen anything like Prairie Bible Institute. And I'll tell you why. See, when I was in the service, I became a Christian in 1957 while in the service, and immediately I began being concerned for my friends in the service with me. I was attending a good Bible-based church, so it was good that I had that kind of foundation then. But there was a time in my Christian experience where I wanted to learn more about the Bible. You see, I had some wonderful Christian pastors who knew how to preach like no one I ever seen before. So I thought that with a little bit Bible training, I could at least achieve a little bit understanding and knowledge of the scriptures. But in 1958, I had been in the service for 2 years, and an opportunity came to re-enlist if you served 2 years for 4 more years. So I thought that was a good opportunity. So I did that. But after 1 year, there was the desire on my part to go to school and get some kind of Christian education. And that meant having to find a school close by my base or some other way. Then I found out that there was a regulation that if you have served 3 years, you were able to get out of school, out of the service, with an honorable discharge, providing you're studying for the ecclesiastical ministry. So they made provision for that. And now I had a hard time because when I went through high school, I just kind of passed by the skin of my teeth, so to speak. I did the best that I knew how, but I had some disadvantages that kept me from going to the higher classes like algebra and stuff like that. I didn't have that background and that experience behind me, so I uh, I didn't do too well in that area. So I thought maybe I couldn't get into a college. So I tried, and the Lord opened that door for me to attend a Christian college. At least that's what they called themselves. So I was all excited. I couldn't wait to go. I got my release from the service and permission, and I couldn't wait to go to Christian school and learn to study the Bible. Oh, that was so exciting. But when I got there, I found out they had different ideas. Their idea was to gain an accreditation for the school. And the philosophy was, and they told me that when I got there, that you get your degree first, and then later on you can go to seminary to get your Bible training. Well, that was a disappointment to me, but I didn't have any money. It was when I got the service at that time, they had discontinued the GI Bill. So at that time, there was no GI Bill available. They stopped that after the Korean War. So I happened to fall into the cracks there where I didn't have any kind of educational funds to get through college. And I don't know how long it was going to take me at the rate I was going with 3 courses a semester if I could afford them. So I worked full time at a job at night and went to school during the day and managed to handle 3 classes at a time for a couple of years. But during that time, I visited the local bookstore and I became acquainted with 4 books that actually changed my life and my whole course of direction. The first book was The Normal Christian Life by Watchman Nee. And the next book that impacted my life was one similar on the same type of subject of revival and the deeper Christian experience. It was Roy Hesch's book on the Calvary Road. Then later on, I found out about another book by a man by the name of L.E. Maxwell. I didn't know anything about him. He wasn't as popular as the other writers, but he wrote a book called Born Crucified that captivated my mind. So I read his other 2 books, Crowded to Christ and Abandoned to Christ. And as I read his book, I noticed that he started a Bible Institute up in Canada. Well, I don't know how many years ago that was. I figured, well, if he started that, probably not there anymore. So I investigated, found out the school was in existence and it was going full course. They had over 3,000 students attending that school, and it was located in the little hamlet of the village called Three Hills. And you can imagine just by the name of that it wasn't a very well-known place. So with God's help and time, I was able to save $300 over the next year in order to have enough money to attend that school. But so that door finally opened. Now let me tell you about this school. L.E. Maxwell started this school back in 1923. He had been a student at a school in Nebraska, I think it was, or someplace like that down there. And or Iowa or someplace. He was attending a school there, and the word came from some people up in Three Hills, Alberta, from a farmer by the name of Fergus Kirk. And he's requesting that someone come up there and maybe start a Bible study. They didn't have anything like that there, so Mr. Maxwell decided to visit them. But he confessed later on that the 3 things he never wanted to do while he was in school. He didn't want to go and preach to a farm community. He didn't want to go where it was cold. And he didn't want to go somewhere where he had to teach. He saw himself as a preacher, I guess. So it appeared that in the plan of God, he was to do all of them. So he went up and he started this Bible study with 8 people. And by the time I arrived at the school, quite a few years later, the school had grown to over 3,000 students. A fully operated Bible school. They had music and everything you needed to understand the ministry. They had missionaries who were teachers there. And so Prairie came into existence, and they offered a course of study designed to train missionaries for the mission field. Also, pastors were included, but their main focus was on missionaries. Well, I wanted to be missionary. I was challenged by a visiting missionary to one of the churches in California that talked about the land of Taiwan and the need for missionaries in that land. It's a wide open field, but no one seemed to want to go. So I told the Lord if he wanted me to go there, I'd prepare myself to go. So for the 4 years I attended Prairie, I I had that in focus. I went to the Oriental prayer meetings. I tried to find out everything I could about Taiwan and China, and we had missionaries who were former missionaries with China Inland Mission and Overseas Missionary Fellowship. We had a man named Mr. Cook who was teaching us missionary principles and practices, and he was a missionary himself, and he understood these principles well. So I was well trained by well qualified men, godly men who knew something about the mission field. And all of our teachers, they were so unique and so wonderful, and I never had teachers in college like these ones at Prairie. I mean, they were far superior to anything I've ever seen before. Now, I didn't know much about Prairie as to the staff at Prairie. I knew that Prairie came to that area and there was really nothing there to start with. But Prairie has become like a little city in the midst of a small town. You see, Prairie has their own engineers and carpenters and builders, mechanics, different types of professionally trained individuals as part of the staff at Prairie. And in my first year at Prairie, I didn't have any money to go anywhere to leave the school, so I was able to stay and work as a summer worker. Now, the wonderful thing about that is because I stayed and worked at the school for the summer, all my room, board, and tuition was paid for my next school year. And over the next 3 years, I traveled the next year with a group called the Men of Song, and we traveled throughout Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And after that experience, because I was representing the school, my second year of Bible school, or third year of Bible school experience was paid for. And in my junior year, I sang together with a quartet, and we traveled throughout Ontario and Michigan. So in my third year, I was able to take care of my final year at Prairie by representing the school. So they did that for us. We stayed on staff. They took care of our room, board, and tuition. And when I got out, when I left Prairie, I left there with all the education I needed to prepare me for the mission field. And I didn't owe one penny of a bill for school afterwards. When I graduated from Bible school, I was accepted by a mission organization. I became a missionary candidate, went through missionary candidate school. And after that period of time, I was ready to go to prepare doing deputation work. I had two or three deputation opportunities while I was yet in missionary internship. So I've gone through all the programs necessary to prepare me. But in 1968, that door to Taiwan closed for me. And but what had happened, God opened up some other doors, and I was able, through the pastoral ministry, to employ some of these missionary principles and practices in my first church with some success. So all wasn't in vain. But let me tell you about Prairie Bible Institute. When I later on, about 5 years later, I was I was enabled to become a staff member of Prairie and work for 2 years at the school. And I got to find out all these godly people that worked there were genuine people. They weren't parading around as spiritual icons. They were genuine. I worked with them in the different uh, fields of service. In my first year as a summer worker, I worked in the welding shop with Alf Azier, and he would have taught me how to do welding, and I stayed with them. Then later on, shortly after, they needed somebody to work in the bakery, so I learned how to bake bread while working with the baker. He provided all the bread for the school during the school year. So during the summer, I got to work in the bakery and work in the welding shop. And then I had a chance to go and work in a Bible camp as a counselor for a week. And at that time, one of my teachers that taught homiletics was our camp pastor. And friends, I never knew that this man was such a wonderful, marvelous preacher. His name was David Berg. Some may know him, but he was a great teacher, but he was equally a preacher, especially for children. I remember he and his wife were at camp that summer, and it was a great experience for me to see some of these staff members working there at the camp. Bible school teachers working at a Bible camp with children. So it was a great experience. But later on, I discovered that there were over 300 different people working at Prairie. There were staff members, and they were all paid the same amount of money. For instance, the man that taught classes and taught Bible was paid the same amount of money as the men that shoveled the snow off the walk. You see, it was all our housing and utilities, electricity, heat, everything was provided by Prairie, and it was manufactured right on campus. We provide our own electricity and everything. So everything was self-sustained at the Institute. And because of this, students at Prairie were able to go there at a minimal cost and get a top grade Bible education because these people of God sacrifice great sums of money to be professional people to serve at Prairie Bible Institute. And look, friends, I never forgot that. It was a wonderful blessing. And for 2 years, I had a chance to be part of that staff. And during that 2 years, I got my call to come to my second church. And so that opened many wonderful doors to me. But let me conclude with a few other things. After I left Prairie, I pastored a small church at Champion, Alberta. It was a small church. They were struggling. No one ever wanted to come there. And I, as a staff member, I went and filled the pulpit for them. And they were so hungry for the Word of God. And eventually they asked me if I would come and be their pastor. And the Lord enabled me to do so. And it was one of the highlights of my Christian experience. But in 1978, three wonderful things happened to me, and I'll never forget them. First of all, I heard while I was at Champion that Prairie began praying for revival. Every Friday evening, they would meet together as a staff to pray for revival. And I wondered if these godly people met together to pray for revival, then why shouldn't I do that for my own church? So I began praying for revival too. And friends, God sent it. It really happened. It happened to me. I don't know about anybody else, but it happened to me. And it also happened to Prairie Bible Institute about the same time. And I was able to be part of that wonderful Christian experience. And I understand that Prairie had two other ones in the time past. But I remember the one in 1978. Also in 1978, I completed a course in biblical Greek, New Testament Greek, from Moody Bible Institute. I took the correspondence. Prairie didn't have Greek at that time, but later on they had Greek and Hebrew after I graduated. And then I had a chance to go to Bill Gothard's advanced seminar on spiritual gifts. That was a wonderful experience, and God provided a way for me to go from Alberta to California to attend that conference. And it was a wonderful thing I had to share with my people. And then finally, in 1978, they asked me to be the camp dean at the camp. That meant providing all the spiritual and uh, Bible teachers and everything that had to do with the spiritual aspect of the camp. And while I took on that responsibility, a friend of mine had a sister who was the manager of the Canadian Bible Society bookstore. She contacted me. She says, Hank, I have a lot of materials left over from last year from David C. Cook, vacation Bible school materials that you might be interested in. So I was able to get these materials to use for camp. And friends, I didn't have any trouble getting teachers. With that material, everything was so exciting and everybody wanted to teach. And it was a very successful camp at that time. Now, it wasn't, I don't think it had to do anything with me, but it was the time, 1978, where God seemed to be doing so many wonderful things in my own life. So I wanted to share with you about this place called Prairie Bible Institute. I left Prairie because I was in a desperate situation and I wanted to study the Bible. And the college that I attended was really going backwards as to their understanding and commitment to the scriptures. It was a time when Southern Baptists really fell away from the truth. And so I was there at that time, and Prairie was a breath of fresh air for me. And now, over the years, Prairie has changed. Mr. Maxwell has died. Mr. Rendell, who was the chancellor, he's 91 years old now. We're still good friends, and I talk to him regularly. He works with Stephen Olford Ministries, training men how to expound the scriptures, and he's still active. But things have happened since Mr. Rendell left, and the liberal element has taken over the school, and they have persuaded the school to become a college, an accredited college. So what Prairie is doing now is what the school was doing that I left to attend Prairie. So some may say, well, why are you so critical about Prairie becoming a college? Because I left the college that went after accreditation, and it rescued me. Priests like Prairie Bible Institute rescued me. And friends, I can't help saying this. And I say it from my heart. I think Prairie is not like now, like the church at Ephesus that left their first love. They embrace a system that I left. And most of the people there think it's really great that Prairie has now become a college, a Christian college, instead of a Bible Institute. Well, you may think that's an upgrade, but I think Prairie has left their first love. And I'll leave it with that. I know I have been critical somewhat, but you'll understand why. Prairie means everything to me. It was my whole life. It rescued me from who knows what would have happened to me and prepared me for God's service. And what I'm doing right now is a result of the training I had and the examples I had through Ellie Maxwell and Dr. T.S. Rendell, who are my friends and mentors. And I never forgot what they had done with that school. And I'll never forget the great times when God visited that school and I was able to be a part of that. Thank God for Prairie Bible Institute. It's a memory that I never want to forget. And I hope that it'll never become a memory and replaced by a secular institute. And with that, I close my message. See you later.